Hi everyone. Welcome to the Talent Webinar Series with Mila Associates. We are so excited for our third webinar of the year, our final webinar of the year. And it's just been a really fun, really great content. I'm Swathi Garg. I'm the founder of and CEO of Mila Associates. We focus on professional services and customer success recruitment. I apologize. I'm trying to talk too fast. I will slow down. We focus in SaaS and tech, and we work with companies all over North America. And we decided to start this webinar series to give a talent lens on the customer success and professional services function, because that's what we do, and that's who we talk to and interact with all day, every day. And we're so excited about today's topic. And I'm going to share a little bit about myself, and we'll get started really quickly. Parul, can you hit the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So for me, I'm a founder. I'm an entrepreneur. Obviously, started Mila Associates 7 years ago, so it's been really great learning and growing with the industry. I went to the University of Illinois. I don't know if there's any alums in the house. And then I also started my own personal brand earlier this year. That's a little quiet right now, but it's all about professional and personal development. So if anyone's curious about that, I'd love to talk about that. We are so excited about today's topic around titles. This is something that we work with as recruiters every day in our space with candidates, with our clients. And it was so awesome to talk to another professional another CS leader that is just as passionate about this topic and has so much to say. And we're so excited about the content and all the data and all the information she's going to provide today. Parul is a fellow Chicago CS leader with me. She's a friend. She has done amazing things in the space, and we're just so excited for her to be here today and talk about the topic and really have a great discussion. We're going to go into after her talk, we're going to do a fireside chat and Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A. We'd love to get to them, and we're just so excited to get started. So I'm going to pop it over to Parul.
Thank you so much, Swathi. So nice to see all of this wonderful activity in the chat already. I hope we have a really engaged audience. As Swathi mentioned, please do drop your questions in. We have a lot of time today to just chat and learn together. I wanted to share a little bit about myself. So my name is Parul Bhandari. I do live in Chicago, as Swathi said, and I'm a mother, a wife, a speaker, and I happen to be an occupational ergonomist. You can ask me about that in the chat or on LinkedIn sometime. And I got into customer success. I transitioned actually after a career as a consultant doing ergonomics consulting. And I actually also worked a little bit of time as an HR manager. I came back to a company that had formed some software, and I got to launch my first CS team. That was in 2016. And since then, I've really worked with other startups to reorganize teams, continue to provide mentorship and build out teams. And why this topic is so kind of near and dear to my heart is, a little bit of just things I did as an HR manager, experiences that I had there, but also things that I brought to my CS team. So I hope that it's actionable for everyone and that you get some clear takeaways after the session. So why do titles matter in customer success? People may think titles are very individualistic. Somebody may say, I want a title for myself to be seen in a certain light. And I think there is a good deal of individual success that is tied to titles. However, titles are not just about individual success. If you are titling correctly, you are actually creating collective alignment and you are growing your company. So I really say that clear job descriptions and clear titling is about growth and collective alignment. So that is something that I hope will resonate with everyone throughout this session. So what are the things that we are going to discuss today? We have three key areas of focus. One is the evolution of titles in customer success. Two is how to design titles for CS team success. And I mean like long-term, right? And then really what matters most. And then we're going to jump into the fireside chat with Swathi. So I did a little searching on the internet prior to the session. And I will tell you, this is a quick search. I just searched customer success jobs, as you can see, and I'm actually sharing with you my top results. And what I want to kind of point out here and what I want everyone to notice is the results all vary, right? We go from associate to manager to representative in the title. And you know, and I know that there are several titles out there that I have not even covered. Why is this important? You know, the titles out there can be confusing. And if you're in the job market, you might not really understand what a job title means and what you should be looking for. I sort of think the CS industry lacks maturity. I don't think this is a dig to my fellow CS folks. I think it's just literal maturity. We are not that old as an industry, right? If anyone listened to the previous Milo Associates chat with Ralphie English, that, you know, she highlights real CS jobs didn't come into being until the 2000s. And so if we think about that, it's a pretty low amount of tenure. And I think that lack of maturity leads to some of where we have title confusion. There's also a lack of alignment on roles and responsibilities. I'm sure that to many people in this room, if I asked everyone to raise their hands, you would say, I own renewals. I don't own renewals. I own expansions. I don't own expansions. There is a wide variety of what we do as CSM and, or I should say CS professionals, right, in general. And I think that because of that lack of alignment, there is some title confusion. Also, and I think this is, you know, something that happens, especially in the world that I've come from, which is startup world, but leaders often hire catch-all roles initially. They are building a startup team. They don't really know what they need. They need a little bit of support. They need a little bit of success, and they hire a role as a catch-all. And then as they are adapting, as they are growing, they're adapting. But what I'm going to point out today is you can get ahead of this problem with really not too much effort and actually design your team out from even that early stage for long-term success, right? So this is kind of one of those things that I would love to see the industry change a bit. Instead of just going into startup mode and saying, hey, we need to hire a role that can do everything. Let's actually be really thoughtful about what we are doing. Okay, let me get into a little bit on the evolution. And I really encourage you all to check out YouTube, check out Milo Associates. I'm not going to do the job that Ralphie did really well last week, talking about how people get into customer success, but she talks about the diverse backgrounds that come in and how the evolution of CS began. What I want to kind of pinpoint is we're a little bit of a hodgepodge of various roles out there. And as customer success came into being, many companies had like account managers, sellers doing customer success, biz dev people doing customer success, not really sure where the ownership was. And then we kind of transitioned to maybe a support team, or we called it customer service, owning customer success, until this title came to be. To be frank, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, but when I started my first CS team, we didn't know customer success was a thing. We were just like searching the internet, reading books, and we stumbled upon the language that is customer success. So I think it being so new, even at that period, a lot of times these legacy titles still stick around. And I'm not, this is not anything against account management. If you're an account manager, you're very much involved with customer success and long-term customer experience. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying there's just a little bit of like a overlap that's often sort of missing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what else is going on here. Changing job responsibilities. So as roles have evolved, job responsibilities evolved, right? So we basically started with, you know, account managers doing X, Y, and Z. The roles were a little bit defined. Oh, now we're adding customer support. Okay, let's do a little bit of a support role. And then we're creating this hybrid of what is customer success. However, titles may not always have matched the pace, right? Some companies adopted titles very early in the customer success sort of titling standard, as I call it. Other companies may not have. Clear job descriptions really become the important crux of everything that helps us to understand what exactly it is that I'm going to be doing in my job. So I think you'll hear me talk about this a lot, but having really clear job descriptions, this is the most important thing. And it leads to us paying people appropriately. It leads to us, you know, doing kind of everything that runs our team's properly, more appropriately. So that's kind of the message here. All right, and then last but not least, titles are confusing, right? I think titling can be super confusing. I recently spoke to a company, and they are looking for enterprise customer success managers, is what I'll call it. Their titling reads something like managing partner. And I was like, that's really an interesting title. I really think it's a cool title. Oh, I like that title. It is not what I would have thought an enterprise customer success title was. So anyways, just to give you an example, titles can be confusing. So if you're out there doing the job hunt, I really, really cannot say it enough, but read the job description, read it thoroughly. That's really going to be your best friend there. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of real life examples of how this might play out. And I've just got two kind of fictitious companies that I want to use for these examples. So one, we've got our company one, company two. So company one, is launching their CS team. Everybody in their company that is a manager of others has manager in their title. So when they go out and they look at the market, they say, all right, well, we have these new managers of our team. We're going to call them customer success managers. Seems logical, right? And actually, in a funny enough way, I mentioned this to somebody this morning while I was dropping my son off at school, and they said, oh yeah, manager seems like a logical title, to have for somebody that manages others. Well, guess what? That person was actually managing other folks that were owning customers. So the CSM below them became called representatives. This eventually led to some need for overcorrection, right? Because what they learned is as they grew, they weren't really matching the market. Their CS representatives were actually CSMs, and their managers of CS needed to be titled correctly. So what they ended up having to do is do some major salary corrections, some major adjustments to match the industry as they grew as an entity, okay? Why is this important? Again, for that company, you're not planning in your budget cycle for some massive salary overcorrection. That's not a thing you want to be doing. And that's honestly a risk to you as a company. But also, there's long-term implications for those individuals. So if you're in a managerial role and you're called a customer success manager, your trajectory is a little bit slower, right? You're going to have this trajectory that's going to start to play out starting with that CSM title. And it can be really have some long-term implications, okay? Let's talk about another example though. So here's kind of a different one. Let's say you have a company that has a tenured CSM number one. They are paid a rate, right? That at the time that you're setting up your CS team, you think is a competitive rate, right? You're like, okay, this sounds pretty good. I'm just going to pay them X dollars. Now you hire two new CSMs who come from the market. These new CSMs have pay expectations or whatever, and they get paid 30% more than this person. What do you think can happen in this scenario, right? Number one, you're going to have an employee that's pretty unnerved, because most people do talk about this kind of stuff in companies, right? Whether we want to know that or not, I think most people talk about what is happening with their salaries. So their titles were the same, their JDs were the same, but their pay was different. What this scenario also would lead to is a major overcorrection and salary adjustment. But in addition to that, you now have employees that are disgruntled. So you're now taking additional steps of employee retention, right? And things to make sure that that employee stays content. So it is really important to really think about even that first CSM, right? What is the pay that I'm going to give them? Why is it so important that I really level that pay correctly? And I know this is not a talk about pay, but with titling comes pay. So I'm putting it out there. I'm listening, I'm reading this chat, so thank you guys for the comments as well. And I agree with you on the salary bands. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so how to design titles for CS team success. I'm simplifying this process. I'm going to make it seem a little too easy, and I recognize it's not always so easy. So definitely use your resources if you have access to HR people or recruitment firms, or if you're looking for more help, happy to jump in and provide more insight after this. But for the purpose of the talk, here's kind of my 3 tenets for success. One is determine the skills that you need. So you need to assess what your most important skills are and drive decisions based on those needs. That's going to give you best alignment to what your company is going through. You should then do the research, right? And put the work in to title correctly and use data to drive your decision. And I'll show you kind of some examples of that data. The last bit is title for the results that you seek. If there are key expectations that you're intending to set, make sure that you're titling that way and recruit with care, right? So that you really are setting the right expectations for not only your team, but your customers as well, okay? All right, so let's go into this first bullet, determining the skills that you need. So first things first, every company is different. Company philosophy, mission, and vision are key to this strategy. I am not here to tell you which title is the right title. I am here to tell you that you have to look at your company and really understand, how have things been titled in the past. That being said, you should also understand what's happening in the external market. So that's what we're going to talk about. First things first, document the skills that you need, right? Just write them down. Here's all the things I need this role to do, okay? You document all those things, and then you circle what are the highest impact skills. I want you guys to look at what I've circled here, right? If I look at this, hypothetically, this job, in my current view, this is not what I would call a CSM, right? It may be something a CSM could do, but it's actually leaning a little bit different, right? So I might think about, what do I do with these skills and how do I find a job description that matches these skills? Rather than making something up, I actually go to the market, I look at titles in my company, I look around, and I make sure that I'm creating something that is cohesive. And then my last step is take that initial role that you're creating and plan for growth. Like, start now. Say, okay, well, this person in the future would become senior, and then they would become manager of, and then, map out what the growth plan is for them. Because by doing that, you're actually going to save yourself a lot of time later, but you're also going to get ahead of any salary issues or any other issues that might come up. Not everyone's going to follow a perfect career path, and you might change it and adapt it later, but at least you've done that work initially. Okay, so this part's pretty simple, seemingly simple, right? But then there comes the research, which is the part I think takes a little bit more work. So I'm going to say, do the work. Go out there and read the job descriptions in the market and find the ones that match what you do what match what you want to do. I'm going to give you guys a real life example from an HR job that I had. Okay, so I worked as an HR manager for 3 years, and at one point I supported a team of very technical machinists. So these people were not just people that worked in a plant, they actually had very technical skill sets, and they did this fine machine work, right? Like you'd never seen. So they were getting paid the same rates as employees in that company's plant. And that, they started to get a little bit disgruntled. They said, we're doing different things. They actually came to me as their HR manager and said, we'd like you to help us, right? We'd like to help figure out how to get leveled correctly. And so I actually had to go out to this, I don't even remember what this place was called, but it was like a salary library, okay? I have to find out what they call these things because I can't remember. But it was like a library, and we went and we actually read books in that region's job market, and we read job descriptions. This is all before a lot of tools on the internet that we now have today. We read job descriptions and we looked at salaries in that region, and we actually had to re-level this whole group of employees. Long story, just to say that as an HR manager, it's a very common practice to do this. This is called a salary survey. But I actually think we all should be doing this. If you're a CEO, a founder of a new startup, or if you're the first time hiring manager for a startup, or even if you're a hiring manager for an established team, taking the time to do this can really help set you up for success. And when it comes time to hire the next person or promote someone, you've already done all the work. This is a super simplified table. I use just like an Excel table, and I'm happy to share a salary survey example with anybody that would like, so you can reach out to me. I am also on LinkedIn. I can post my LinkedIn in a little bit, but you can reach out to me and I'm happy to share that. But these are essentially where you're looking at other jobs, you're looking at titles in the market, you're looking at salary ranges, which we have a lot of access to this data now, that some new legislation has come out around the country. And you look and say, are there any weird overlaps, any conflicts I need to look at? Is there job responsibility conflict I need to look at? How do I actually think this through? Look at your source, and then you make a proposal, right? And you're actually making your proposal to your leadership team, to your board, to other folks. And you're saying, based on what I've researched in the market, I'm actually making a determination of what our salaries need to be. How you get that buy-in comes from all this data, right? You're not showing up as someone who hasn't done the work. You've done all the work. You're bringing that work to the table. And believe me when I say, it's very easy to throw in a senior title on somebody and say, oh, now you're a senior and you're going to get paid X dollars more. But thinking about this in the long term will help you for your next senior, for your next title, for your next promotion. It is a great activity to undertake. I'm happy to help. If anyone's going through this, I will, love to chat with you about it. All right. And last but not least, title for the results that you seek. So you're not just titling with what do I need done? What do I need this person to do? But I have an actual result that I seek. What is my outcome? We're CS people. We all know and care about outcomes, right? So every title that you put out in the market has internalized implications and also has external implications. Customers want to know, who can I call to escalate to? Who can I call for an expansion? And if they don't feel like they're getting that from the person on the phone, they're going to go and they're going to escalate to someone else. Titles should drive the message of who does what very clearly, and they should be aligned inside and outside of our organization. So here's my case study, okay? And I think this is a made up case study, but I'm sure this is true for many of us, right? A company where CS owns onboarding, okay? So head of CS is on a call with the VP of sales and a customer executive. After the introduction, the customer only speaks to the VP of sales because they feel that they are at the same level as them. This customer also is very hierarchical, so in my example, so that may not be the case with everybody. Following the sale, the customer continues to only email the VP of sales. So if you think about it for a moment, what have we created here? By having inconsistent titles in our organization, the customer is feeling they can only connect with this VP, right? But now it's time for onboarding. The sale has occurred. They need to get started. By reaching out to the VP, they're frankly using the VP's time, which the VP should be moving on to the next probably sale that they're working on. And they're using their own time inadequately, right? So what do we have? We have lack of consistency of who leads what. We have customers who don't engage with the person that leads the actual activity they need. And we have loss of value. So actual money and time is lost. Sales time, CS disconnect, and customer lag time. So, this is where, think about your outcomes. If you choose to title people all over the place in your company, you're going to possibly have scenarios where your customers actually see them that way as well. All right. Okay, we're going to wrap this up now, and I'm so glad to see conversation and questions, and I would love to, engage on some of this in our fireside chat as well. So what matters most? At the end of the day, to me, this is about two things. It's people and it's value, right? People deserve to be paid for the work that they're doing and the job that they are best compared to. I am an HR manager, so obviously I have a skewed opinion on this, but a former HR manager. But I think that, if we do the right thing and title people appropriately, we not only have long-term contentment, but we have long-term success for those individuals. Companies also gain, right? If you are a company and you put out a title of, hey, I want to hire a head of CS, or hey, I want to hire a CSM, I want individuals with the right skills. I want the right people to come to me, right? I want to make sure my recruiting process is smooth. If I'm using Swati and her firm, I want to make sure they know exactly the kind of candidate I want. So titling and job descriptions are really key here. What else matters? Value. Let's be honest. The bottom line, right? Correct titles get you the value that you seek, lower risk and higher reward. You get customers that recognize the skill set that they need for their own success. And you also get, that alignment, right? And everybody's aligned. You reduce the need to overcorrect or have salary corrections later. You reduce the need to change course. You reduce the need to lose employees, right? So everybody knows, there's a ton of value in employee retention. So, that in itself stands alone. So hopefully this process, although a little bit simplistic in nature, really hones in the point that what matters most is our people and our value that we bring into our companies and to our customers. And the best way to set ourselves up for success early on is make sure that our titles and our JDs are aligned. So that's it for me today. Hopefully this was insightful, and I thank you guys for the comments. We're going to jump over to Swati and the fireside chat.
Thank you
I'm
so
going to
much,
end the
Parul. That
slideshow as
was,
well.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna end the slideshow as well. Sorry, I was just
No,
noting
that's
that.
perfect. Thank you so much, Parul. It was so good. It was so filled with such phenomenal content. We already have the Q&A blowing up. We're so excited. I have some questions for you, so we're gonna do our fireside chat. But please keep putting in questions in the Q&A. We will try to get to all of them. So please keep doing that. But we're so excited. That was so good, and it's definitely getting my juices flowing. So I really appreciate the conversation. So the first question I had for you today was, so in your opinion, are titles more important or job descriptions?
So if we could live in a world without titles, I think that would be awesome. I don't think it's possible, right? A title, you need it because it's short and sweet, but I think job descriptions are the most important thing. So I really encourage anyone that's looking for a job or anyone that's posting a job to spend time and do the job description correctly. Because while we have hopes that everyone is watching this session and titling correctly, titles may not always be aligned. But as long as you know what you're doing and that you're getting paid to do what you're doing, you're in good shape.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then how do you know you had done something wrong in your titling, right? So what effects did it have long term and how did you know that?
Um, so I kind of gave an example of my company one of where, the manager of CSMs was called customer success manager, and then everybody below had this representative title. This is kind of actually a real life scenario. And why it was important and why I knew we were wrong is we actually got acquired. Once you get into a new scenario, you now recognize and learn that other people have these other titles that are more industry standard. And we actually realized and recognized that people were doing the same work. So it caused us to, have to overcorrect and get everyone's pay corrected. In the end, it was actually a positive activity. So I'm not calling it out for any major negative reason. It's just something that, as a company, you're not always planning for like correction, salary correction and stuff like that. So those things are budgetary items that can be a little bit trickier to handle.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a really great example. I guess I never thought about the fact that merger and acquisitions are also great learning opportunities in terms of titling. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So I know you talked about this a little bit in your talk, but why do you think like generally, like why does it matter that different employers call things differently, right? Why do they when they call roles differently? Why does that matter ultimately?
It I don't want to say and be overly prescriptive. Like many employers are going to choose their titles based on their own kind of company design, right? But as you think about established roles, like CS is fairly new, right, in the market. Think about an established role. If I say to you, I'm a brand manager, right? A brand manager has a very specific connotation to it. You are a marketing person that focuses on brand development and brand acceleration, right? And in the world of like where I used to work in CPG, brand management is one of the top jobs out there. It's very difficult to call people something different when you know that this skill set is so essential to your business. So I think part of why employers call customer success different things is they don't really know yet what they need. They're kind of figuring it out, or they've designed something in the past and they just need to stay on course in that way. But alignment, you know, here, I'm gonna put this out there. You should change titles if you have to, right? Go ahead and do it. Don't change levels though, okay? Changing leveling, that's a bit risky, right? So if somebody was, a senior CSM and you make them an account manager, make sure that they're still leveled correctly. But thinking about the long-term implications of where do you stand in the industry, right? So in CPG, every brand manager knows exactly what they're going to do when they show up to the next job, right? Or they show up to a job that day. So we're really setting the stage for the future, I think, of CS rather than necessarily what we're in today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And something else is like the reason that we see it all the time, right? We're talking to candidates all the time and they're doing a lot of the CS responsibilities, but then they're title is totally off, and then their company structure is totally off to what is industry standard. So when they're looking for jobs or applying, like, it's also harder for them, right? So I do think that having that internal alignment is so important, and trying to get your best industry standard for yourself too, and for your company as well. So I love that. Um, so could you elaborate on the internal and external elements that influence the choice of CS titles within a company? I know you talked about it a little bit, but could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's roles, responsibilities, like a little bit of clarity there is often lacking. When I started my first CS team, sales team was actually doing the work that CSMs eventually took over. So we were kind of slowly taking it over. And so therefore titling was confusing because we didn't own it from day one, right? That happens a lot with CS teams that take on renewals or take on a portion of expansions later. You maybe didn't own it on day one, so your day one title didn't match it. But that's where I think the business really thinking about what they really need is important, that first step in the process. There's another element, it's other people's titles, right? So if your job is called product owner, somebody might say, well, my job is product owner. Well, why isn't CS titled the same? Why isn't it called CS customer owner or something like that, right? And so you also are dealing with internal, like, not politics per se, but internal, like, standards, right, and norms. So you really do have to kind of decide what direction you're going to go. And a lot of times for CS, like, I just recommend go with the standard. I wouldn't go outside of what is kind of more normal in our CS industry. I think what we send when we say that message, we're sending the message to our internal organization to say, these are what jobs are titled externally. So we're going to do ourselves a favor to say that we have these roles for our customers, right? If they work with other vendors, they expect to hear the same title across the board. So if I call it customer owner, they might be confused as to what that means, right? They might not understand that title. So let me just go with the standard. That would be my best, advice if I had to give it. But I think there's a lot of, internal, external elements that come into play that you can't always go to the standard. So you have to kind of go with what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors, right? But I like when you don't know, go to the standard. I like that advice.
Yeah,
I think it's very direct. I
keep
love
it
that.
easy.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna actually go back to the Q&A because it is getting a little long, and I want to get to some of these questions. So, the first one is, what source would you recommend in searching average salary? So, this person knows that it depends on location, title, feedback. Glassdoor is a good example, but really just want to understand, what are some recommendations?
That is a great question. That is the age-old, like, HR dilemma, to be honest. Okay. So what an HR person will typically do, and I'm telling you this background because I think it's relevant. What an HR person will typically do is they will say, I'm going to decide where our company is located, where our headquarters are, and we're going to price various parts of the market, right? So for example, you might say, we're headquartered in New York City. I'm going to price salaries for people that sit at our headquarters location in New York City. Anyone outside of New York that's, like, say, in the United States, we're going to have a remote, like, US price because these people aren't going to sit. And these salaries will vary, to be frank, right? You'll have a New York City standard that is actually based on other salaries in New York. You'll have a standard for the rest of the country. This is also how it works internationally as well, right? So when these HR people are setting salary standards, they might take it, if you have an office location in Paris, they're going to actually set the price to Paris. But if you have an office location in a small town in France, you might be setting the price to that small town in France, and you might see variation even city to city. What I recommend as a source, so I'll be honest, like, there's a lot of sources out there. Pay Scale is like a company that does this. Glassdoor obviously is great for getting data pretty easily and free as well. A lot of times HR managers have to pay to get this data for digital data, to be frank. And that's why I went to that, I can't remember what it's called, this library of pay scale information, but there are these government agencies that you can actually go and read and find out what the pay is. But if you're looking to create an average, what I would recommend is look at your office locations and price for that city, and then price, regionally otherwise, because you're going to hit a lot of price variation based on, like, cities and other things. And then I'm answering multiple parts of this question because I think it's kind of related. If you're submitting like an internationally remote job, for example, it is hard to look at an average. Again, you should go based on your global regional averages. And if you're putting people in London, you got to pay them for like London prices, right? Because the cost of labor in London is much higher than the cost of labor outside of London. Also, just want to point out, I'm talking about cost of labor, not cost of living. So they're actually two different things, and salaries are priced based on cost of labor. Sorry, long answer, but I wanted to answer all of your bullets there. So
Thank you for the detailed answer. I think that was a really robust question. So thank you. Thank you, Olha, and thank you, Parul, for answering that. That was a really great answer. The next question by Virginia is, what are some of the best places to look to find what duties align with what roles?
this is the same. It's like the same question and equally as challenging. Again, I think it goes back to our sources like these pay scales and these glass doors. To be frank, Virginia, sometimes you're not going to even know if you create a new title like gosh, I know like there's a whole bunch of CS titles out there, but if let's just say we imagined up a new one, you would actually need to go and do that survey and look and see what job descriptions and duties fit, and then you could probably salary appropriately or fix your job title appropriately. But I do easy. I'm easy because I don't have access to all these fancy resources on a day-to-day. So if I'm titling for my team, I will typically just do Glassdoor. If I can find the information on Glassdoor or a site like Glassdoor, I will use that. And otherwise, I will use actual job descriptions. The beauty of what is happening right now with state legislation in the United States is that we are getting more requirements to put salary with job descriptions. So there's like, you're getting more data in a job description than you used to have. Some hiring managers are like working around it though. They're putting like these crazy salary. Have you ever seen a salary range that's like 100,000 to 1 million because they don't want to report their salary? They're just doing something, they're using a loophole. But I think I just read job descriptions. When I actually was designing one of my last team's jobs, I actually just read what was out there. I looked to some of the big companies that are setting the standard. Like I actually look to Salesforce a lot because they have so many titles that it's an easy one to find a whole bunch of job descriptions. So yeah, using, bag, borrow, steal is my motto on this one because it's expensive to do salary surveys.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. I love Glassdoor, and then we also read a ton of job descriptions, so we actually do the same thing. So that's yeah, it's right on par. Okay, great. So the next question is, you mentioned the importance to define senior versus standard CSM. Unlike other promotions where the job fundamentally changes, are there themes that you see that separate senior versus standard? And this is from Kevin.
Yeah, great question. Um, I I I don't know that I have read enough senior titles lately, so I'll be frank on that. What I will say is what I think a senior title should do, and I think a senior title should be setting that person up for the next stage. So when I design senior CSM titles, I usually carve out a portion of that role, 10 to 20%, that is designed to own a process, own delivery of that process. So I'll just give an example, and someone on this call probably knows this very well. But when I had a senior CSM title on my last companies, they had ownership for 20% project work, and they owned the implementation and design of our CS software. We did not have CS operations. We were not large enough to have that. But by owning that process, they fully owned all the playbook design. And what is the best thing for a manager of CS to own and know? Playbooks. What is the CS team expected to do? What are the metrics? How do we do health score? What is their activity? So all that data, by designing it, fundamentally, they were getting prepared for the next step. And that's kind of how I like to think about a senior role, right? It's a level up. So if possible, carve out a little time for them to focus on projects or focus on learning and development and training, right? So those are some ideas.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna try to zip through them here because we have 15 minutes. We have a ton of questions. So what are your thoughts on creating your own title that is not the company title based on your current roles and responsibilities. For example, being an account manager within the company, but doing CSM work and creating your CSM title on a platform like LinkedIn.
Interesting. That is super interesting. What are my thoughts? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what my thoughts are. So I think some companies care a lot what you call yourself. And so if you have peers, you want to make sure to call yourself what your peers call themselves, because A, it can be confusing to other folks in your company, and B, it can be confusing to the market. So for example, if two people work at, X company and one person's LinkedIn says account manager, one person's LinkedIn says CSM, I'm going to assume offhand they're doing different jobs. I think what I would do is advocate for myself and maybe go to my team and say, I think we're doing CSM work, and here's why. I'm bringing the data, read some job descriptions, pull them, bring the data. If you feel like you are doing CSM work with an account manager type of a spin, there are many CSMs that do that. Like I think many of my CS teams have owned expansion and renewal. They just didn't necessarily, they owned the customer as well. So they had that CSM direct relationship. So that's kind of the difference of what a CSM is oftentimes, is that direct customer ownership and ownership of that customer's outcomes for their life cycle, for the life of that customer. So I don't know, thinking about that, I would maybe just go advocate and talk to some people, but I would do it with a data-driven approach. If you can pull some job descriptions, similar companies like yours, make it really something that you could present to your boss or your leadership.
Yeah, I agree with Barrel. And the only other thing I would say is, on LinkedIn, sometimes you can just put like customer success manager in parentheses. And sometimes that really helps being like, I'm an account manager, but I do some CS work. So that's just really good for personal branding. And maybe you'll get the attention of your leaders too as you are advocating for yourself. And they might look into the job description and the responsibilities. So that's the other thing I would do, or like account manager slash customer success manager, but something like that. So you're following what the company asks, but then you're also sharing a little bit more about what you do.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Or your headline. I didn't even think about that. Your headline can be
Yeah.
a story too, right? Like a lot of people put, I'm in customer success or whatever, so that people know that your job is still in that focus area. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. So the next question is titles, job descriptions, education, and experience. Which are keys to land and exceed in a CS role? So a little bit away from titles, but a really good question.
That is a great question. What do you? I'm curious what you think, Olivier, because I think this is interesting, right? So it depends. And this is like the typical everybody answer, right? It depends. So in certain jobs I've worked in, we found having people with a little bit of customer service experience or customer facing experience was really important, right? That they were used to customers picking up, because when customers pick up the phone and call, you got to be ready, right? They're going to ask you something and you're not ready for it. So having experience to kind of work with customers, that was one thing that was key. And then the second thing was experience in that field. I don't think this is always relevant. So I'm going to give you guys two examples, but in that particular business, it was relevant to have a little bit of experience in that industry. Why? Because that industry was so complex that if you didn't know how to speak your customer's language, you were already setting yourself back. And we tried like industry training, we tried different things, but we found what worked the best was just having even a year of experience in that industry. Similarly, though, I told you guys I'm an ergonomist, right? And I actually trained CSM to learn how to be ergonomics software CSMs. None of them were previous ergonomists. So in that case, what it really came up to is how robust was our internal training program. My company was really good at training lay people to do ergonomics, and I knew that. And I knew we had an awesome training package to offer. So I just led with that. You don't have to have the background, but you got to do the boot camp when you come in. And so they would learn from our software. So if you've got like amazing resources and you have amazing L&D for your product, you could probably, have limited experience. And then I don't know about education. I really don't, I'm not too like fixed on a direction for education unless you are in a specific space where it maybe calls for that based on experience or whatever. But I think nowadays, a lot of people with different educational backgrounds are coming, into jobs and doing awesome. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit broadly, but.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the one thing I would add to that is, we always say that customer success is on the intersection of being technical and customer facing, right? And so you get that through an education, you get that through experience, and then every CS role is different. Some are more technical, some are less technical. So I think everything does come into play. I don't think unfortunately, I don't think one thing, has more and like necessarily more importance than the other. I do think all of these things come into play. So sorry we couldn't give you like a super direct answer, but hopefully that helps kind of with your journey. But if you have more questions, please let us know. So the next one is with Sarah, and her role is currently labeled as AM, and she wants to know if, excuse me, one second. So she wants to know how to go about proposing a shift in titling to a CSM. So you kind of just talked about that a little bit. So can you elaborate a
Mhm.
little bit more on how to advocate yourself to shifting that title?
Yeah, for sure. I think data is king. I said this a couple times already, but I would pull together like similar companies to your company. I would look at the market and I would look at the roles. If they're all titling them as account manager, I do think that can get tricky and you might have a higher uphill battle. But if other similar companies to either in space or in industry are titling people as CSMs, I would pull those job descriptions and I would maybe make a little presentation, right? In your next one-to-one, like I would love to share with you some of the research I've done and why we need to be titled as such. If I was your manager, I think that seeing somebody do the work to make sure that our company is actually titled correctly, I think that's an awesome thing. If you don't feel like your manager is the right person, you can also talk to your HR team. So many HR teams are doing salary surveys, they're doing these kinds of things in the background, and they're working with managers. So the HR manager could actually come into play to help you get this message across because that's part and parcel of what they do on a regular basis.
Great. Thank you so much. We just have a couple more questions left. So this is from Kimberly. What do you think about companies that call CSMs partner success? I've heard the goal to help clients feel they are equal partners, but I find that it can overlap with team members in charge of managing integration partners, marketing partners. How could companies still help clients feel like partners without causing unnecessary confusion?
That you wrote, I think you wrote this awesome question, Kimberly. But so this happened when I first started in customer success. Nobody wanted to say customer. Everybody wanted to say client or some other kind of word, partner, right? They did not want to acknowledge that this is customers. And again, I'll just go back to, right, like go to the standard. This is not something I as an individual have created. This is something that our industry has created as a title, right? While partner success is great, it can be confusing and it can also okay, I'm not telling you don't use partner success because I know that there are great companies out there that choose that titling. But I think again, making sure your job description is very clear and making sure that it's aligned with what the expectations are internally, right? So that if you have another team that manages integration partners or manages your vendors or whatever, that they're called vendor success or they're called vendor partnerships or whatever, something with that word in it. Sometimes it's nice to ask to get that word added. So even you could be like client partner success or customer partner success. Sounds longer, but sometimes when you get the word in, it directs the customer and the internal teams properly. But I agree with you. Like I kind of just go to the standard. I hear that the choice of customer can feel very harsh, but at the end of the day, there is a value exchange that is, monetary, and that is inherently customer success. So
Yeah, I love that, Barrel. I think, well, Kimberly, you also bring a really good point. So I've heard partner success be multiple different things. So when it comes to, Barrel's point of going to industry standard, I don't know if there is one for partner success yet, because I've heard that title mean a lot of different things. So that's interesting that your question's really interesting because I've already called a lot of things. So yeah, thank you.
I heard
So
there's a chat, Swati, real quick, that says, what about account success manager? And I think that again could be a nice spin to take it a little like stop in account management. traditionally what account management is a sales function that is focused on expansion, right? So it's a partner to the customer, but it's really got a quota. It's got a focus. It's got different job description typically. So yeah, if you're adding in like maybe a success element, you're tying it back to the industry. I think that's a cool idea.
Okay, thank you. And then I think this last question actually is very similar to something we've already answered. So I think I think we are going to skip it because I think you did answer it already. But I think I do have one more question. If because we have a couple more minutes. But if anyone has any others, please let me know. I would really appreciate that. So what I wanted to also understand is um how we've talked obviously a lot about titles and how to incorporate them and all the different ways that external factors impact them, but how does culture and goals impact titles, and also while you're trying to resonate with your customers, right? There's a lot of different play here, so can we just focus a little bit more on culture and goals while also managing the customer expectations and what your title is?
Yes, I'm going to say this in the nicest way possible. I think culture is key when you're titling, right? A company that cares about its employees is going to actually title appropriately because they're going to care about that person's success. What I think often happens is that we have this like hierarchy, and hierarchy comes into play. And that is built into culture. So this whole example I gave of like head of CS and VP of sales, there might be a hierarchy innately in a company that is a VP is a more prestigious title or gets to sit on the exec team, whereas head of CS does not. If you think about culture, right? And I'm advocating to people and I'm preaching to the choir when I say that I think more customer teams need to be on the exec team, right? We all need to have that voice there because what starts to happen is you're diluting the voice. By creating different titles, you're actually diluting like the importance of that organization, right? So I saw a post yesterday. It was like, is customer success, is it nearing the end or something, right? Because of all the layoffs and things going on. And yes, it has been a really trying time in tech, but I think we see where value is, and that is, retention, right? Retention. And if you want to give people the ability to retain, you've got to give them the right resources, and that starts at the top down. So, I think culture comes from that top down, and then you're actually how you design your team, how you title your team is really an indicator of what you actually think about them in a way. So
Yeah, that's
saying that in the nicest way possible to all the companies out there.
great way to end our webinar today. Thank you so much, Parul. This has been so fruitful. We learned so much in the last hour. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We really appreciate your engagement today. And Parul, we really appreciate your just your prep and your engagement throughout this whole thing. She's been wonderful to work with. So if anyone needs any other speakers, like all of them have been fantastic. And this is the last one of the year. So if you have any questions on any of the webinars, please let me know. They will all be on our YouTube channel, on the Meal Associates YouTube channel. So please check that out. Just give us a couple of days and we'll get this one up there as well. We are starting with a communication series that we're going to announce in December, but please watch out for that. We're really excited about a 3-part communication series, all with amazing CS leaders from a talent perspective. So it's going to be fantastic coming up coming up starting in January. And let us know if you have any questions. Barl's here, I'm here. Connect with us, connect with each other, and we'll see you in the new year. Have a wonderful new year. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.